Hey everybody, it's Eric from epautos.com, your libertarian car guy, and I thought I'd do a quick walk around video here of one of my favorite cars. This is the Volkswagen Golf R, and to the non-initiated it looks a lot like a Golf, which is basically just what it is, except it's an extremely powerful and extremely quick Golf. Rather than the standard Golf 1.8 liter engine or even the GTI's 2.0 engine, you got a much massaged version of the 2-liter Volkswagen 4-cylinder engine in this thing, cranking out 292 horsepower through a modified version of Volkswagen's 4Motion all-wheel drive system. Both the regular Golf and the GTI are front-wheel drive only, of course. But what I really like about this thing is not so much its power and not so much its performance, both of which are formidable. This is one of the quickest cars in its class. Other cars in this class include the Ford Focus RS and the Subaru WRX STI, but it's also very demure. I like that. I like the fact that this thing, especially in this mouse gray that they sent me, is not something that really alerts the police eye to what you're up to. The Focus, and even more so the STI with the wings and the scoops and all the loud visual accompaniments, makes a big deal out of touting what they've got, which I appreciated when I was 25 years old. But I'm not 25 years old anymore, and I appreciate being able to drive fast and get away with it even more. And that's why, that's one of the reasons that I like this car so much. Another reason that I like it, and other people may like it as well, is that it's the only car in the class that's available with your pick of a 6-speed manual transmission or an automated manual transmission. Volkswagen's Direct Shift DSG gearbox, which is now a 7-speed transmission. Both the RS and the STI are still manual only. Now, I love manual transmissions. However, if I were going to buy a car to drive every day in, say, DC traffic or Atlanta traffic or San Francisco traffic, gets kind of old dealing with a clutch with not much take-up, constantly having to row the gears. This thing gives you that additional measure of practicality. And speaking of that, note also that this is a Golf, and it's a hatchback, and it's got that tall roof profile, which gives you almost 60 cubic feet of interior cargo space in the back here, which you won't find in the STI, which is based on the sedan and therefore has, I think it's 12 or 13 cubic foot trunk. In any event, it only has about 1/4 to 1/3 of the cargo carrying capacity, and the numbers don't tell you everything. The fact that this is a taller profile, it gives you, in addition to the hatchback, more versatility. It gives you the option of being able to maneuver things into this car that you could not maneuver into a sedan's trunk. No way, no how. Finally, the other thing that I like about this car, leaving aside the option to go with an automatic if you want to, is that it's remarkably civilized. I very much enjoy driving the Focus RX and the STI for about 30 minutes at a time. But both of those cars have very, very stiff rides. They've got very loud exhausts. You can really hear the wind and the tire noise. They're a ball to go out on a track and fool around with, and they're all kinds of fun to knock around your neighborhood with. But again, if I were going to drive a car every single day in traffic or go out on an 8-hour road trip, this is the one that I would want. This one is much more comfortable. It's much more civilized, refined, more of an adult car than the other two cars. And that probably has something to do with the fact that it is, after all, a German car. And even though the Golf that it's based on is, of course, a lower-end Volkswagen and fundamentally kind of an economy-oriented car, just like the donor cars for the Subaru WRX STI and the Ford Focus, the Golf is nonetheless related to Audis. And Audis are, of course, in addition to being German cars, they're luxury cars. So you'll really notice the greater degree of refinement when you drive this car versus the other two. And I'm not slamming the other two. I'm just pointing out the differences between this car and its rivals. Let me show you also some other detail things before I shut this off and go back inside before it pours and finish up my written review. Another thing about this car that's very practical relative to the others is that you've got a roomier back seat. It's not hugely roomier, but it's significantly roomier than the STIs. and also the Focus RS is that you have about 1.5 inches or so more legroom, and that can really matter. Also, again, the taller roof profile gives you that additional measure of headroom, which matters if you're a tall geek like I am. Okay, in addition to the 7-speed automated manual transmission, a couple of the other minor changes and not so minor changes that they've made for the new model year. The car now comes standard with adaptive LED headlights, and they turn with you in the curves, and that's pretty cool. In addition to that, you get the digital cockpit now, in keeping with the sort of higher end vibe of this car. Let me kick it over so you can see. They sent me the manual one, which I actually enjoy driving more. You can see the digital cockpit now coming to life. And, you know, it's configurable, and you can dial up various different things on this, which is pretty nice. And then you've got Volkswagen's secondary flat screen touchscreen right here. And the only objection that I have to this, and this is a general criticism of this type of design, Subaru uses a very similar system, this sort of really nice iPad-style glass flat screen. You'll see the volume button is right here, and the problem is while you're driving, your hand is going to move a little bit, and you'll notice that your station favorites are right adjacent to that, and I find that sometimes as I'm trying to turn this, my hand or my finger will inadvertently touch one of these, which of course will make the station change, and that's fairly irritating. I'm not a huge fan of that. Another thing that I'll complain about, it's one of the very few things that I will complain about with this car, and this is a Volkswagen thing, and it's not just a Volkswagen thing, it's something that a lot of the car manufacturers are doing now. You put the transmission in reverse, and what happens then is that the radio volume automatically turns itself down to the point where you can barely hear it. It's almost inaudible, and I think that's enormously irritating and peremptory and pushy. I'm perfectly capable of checking my surroundings for safety without being nagged by a mother-in-law computer. And speaking of that, the final thing that I'm going to complain about with this car, Park Pilot, bite me, shut up, is that Volkswagen saw fit to put the lane keep assist system in this car as a standard feature. I really don't like it. What it does is attempts to counter steer if it thinks you're wandering out of your lane. And the problem with that is it forces you, for example, to constantly have to signal, even when there's no need to signal. I live in a rural area. I'm often the only car on the road. I think it's kind of idiotic to turn on my left signal when I'm turning into my road when there's clearly nobody around for miles. But if I don't do it, the lane keep assist, what will happen is the thing will actually try to counter steer against my steering input. I do not like it. I wish they would get rid of that. It's one of these little incremental pieces of automated car technology that they are putting into vehicles. And by the way, I use that term very, very deliberately. You'll hear everybody else talking about autonomous cars. That's the preferred choice of words. And I think that that's illiterate in the first place, and in the second place, it's extremely dishonest. The last thing that automated cars are is autonomous. My 76 Trans Am, that's an autonomous car because it's under my control. It's not under anybody else's control. There's no computer controlling it. These so-called autonomous cars are less and less under the control of you, the driver/owner, and more under the control of computers, and even, ultimately, what they want is external sources. You know, nobody ever asks the question, who is going to be in control of these so-called autonomous cars? It's going to be whoever controls the programming, whoever controls all of that, and it's not going to be you, and they're not autonomous. So anyway, end of rant about that. I've got something up on the website actually on that issue that you might be interested in reading. It's the lead story right now, and I should have the written review of this car up shortly. And you can read about it probably within the next day or so. Meanwhile, thanks for viewing, and we will catch up with you again soon.